Although the methodology was wrong, why Ted Cruz was right about Obamacare in about 5 million different ways. We'll talk about that next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Now you listen to me, mister.
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln, from Carbondale to Elgin, if we can collectively continue to tolerate the insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East St. Louis, Illinois.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizens.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black republic. Money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood. I got love for them. Can't clean my act.
I don't want just the misters to listen to me. I want the misters and the misses and the misses and the young ladies and young gentlemen and boys and girls of all ages to tune in once again to another episode of Get Right with Lenny McAllister, the podcast that you find here courtesy of LennyMcAllister.com. You know where to find me. You know where to interact. It is very simple. The Twitter handle is LennyMcAllister. You know the Twitter handle once again, LennyMcAllister. That is just my first and my last name. The Facebook page, you know where to go. There's 2 pages, same guy. Simply go to tinyurl.com/LennyPage. That is tinyurl.com. And that has nothing to do with my actual height. So don't make any puns, jokes, or anything else. I know how cruel you all can be in social media. That's just the name of the website that shortens your URL. That's all it is. It's just a quinky-dink, as they say, that it's being used by a very short individual. But I'm long on character, some would say. Anywho, I want you to give me your feedback on Facebook, if you will. Your feedback on Facebook here on the Monday edition of Get Right with Lenny McAllister. So let's just jump right into it. I don't know what number you want to talk about because there are plenty of numbers to talk about. The easiest one to really poke fun at, talk about, say I told you so, kind of, sort of, is the 5 million lines of codes that President Obama, as the project manager in chief, which is kind of funny because, you know, presidents always try to seem as though they were just like you. I'm just like you. I am the everyday American, except I'm the only person in the whole country that deserves to be president. Isn't that the whole campaign rhetoric when you're running for president? I'm just like you. Mom's apple pie. You know, Americana, baseball, Chevrolet. That's what it was in the 80s. Morning in America with Reagan. All that other jazz. Whatever people use for campaign slogans to show that they are just like you, except they are so much not just like you that they're the only person qualified to be the president of the United States, to be in this extremely exclusive club of about 44 people at this point in time, soon to be 45 in a couple years. So it's this interesting dynamic that they play. But in this instance, with the 5 million lines of code that President Obama, as the project manager in chief, it's going to have to oversee one way or another. I mean, it's not going to be, staying up in the room eating donuts and talking to his team offshore. It's my Accenture experience. It's not like it's going to be like that. But it is something where he's trying to spin it where, honestly, and this is what people talk about with this president. And again, I'm going to go 5 million. I'm going to some other numbers. Love your feedback, like I said. When people get into this president really hasn't run anything, when they talk about, yes, he was in the state legislature, yes, he was in the Senate, but he's never run anything, this is what they're going to hammer him on. Because the spin that you're hearing, the political spin that you're hearing about Obamacare, and yeah, we knew there'd be some glitches. Yeah, we knew there'd be some problems. Well, why wouldn't you delay it? Why wouldn't you put extra resources into it? Why wouldn't you do something else or roll it out a little bit at a time or continue the self-repeal from a political standpoint? You've already repealed it in some regards by delaying some factions of this for political cronies, the employer mandate, the thousands of exceptions. You've already basically admitted that you can't roll this out the way you want to roll it out. So why not, as project manager in chief, do something else? Take another measure, if you will, to make sure that when the thing does roll out, it's not broken like it's been. Where we're not talking about 5 million lines of code. And so I go back to this. When I'm sitting there talking about how, this is the only person that could possibly run for the presidency, but at the same time, they're just like you and me. Can you imagine being a project manager and explaining away the horrible gaffes in Obamacare the way the president and the president's team has been doing right now? I mean, talk about if Ted Cruz played this differently, how much of a genius he would look like, how much of a leader he would look like if he would have played the opposition to Obamacare differently. It wouldn't just be the Tea Party that was ginned up behind him. There would be a lot of people that would say, you know what? This Cruz guy has a point. He's young, Generation X. He's coming from a power state. He looks an awful lot like the Obama story from 2004. Maybe we give this guy a shot. Let's see what he does. Let's see how he develops. Now, and we'll go into the other numbers that play against Ted Cruz, but the 5 million lines of code does, because if you look at how the Obama administration is trying to explain away all of this, most of us would lose our jobs or get kicked off this project. That's just all there is to it. Anybody that says that we wouldn't would be lying. They would be bringing in another project manager midstream saying, XYZ blanked up this project. We need you to fix it immediately. That's what would happen. So when you start talking about HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius and President Obama and the 5 million lines of code, when you start talking about all this, if you put it into a corporate context, one of those two would be gone, and it'd probably be Sebelius, obviously. She's lower on the chain of command. But people are trying to explain this away as if this should have been expected. The only way that you can expect patches of 5 million lines of code to be corrected with the biggest technical rollout in the history of American healthcare, and definitely over the last 50 years, if not the history of the country, if you want to talk about from a bureaucratic perspective. The only way that you can genuinely expect this to be the force that it's been is if the only way is if you had no confidence that this was going to work in the first place. Anybody that thought that this was actually going to roll out smoothly could not have expected these many errors. It's all there is to it. Love your feedback on that, because I personally, I sit here and I say, this proves why this should have been delayed at least a year. And I wrote my article on Global Crime this past week. Something will be coming out for tomorrow as well. Or actually, not tomorrow. Tomorrow's Tuesday. It'll be coming out Wednesday, somewhere in midweek. And the point I made is this. Both sides of this argument, and we'll get into the other numbers now, both sides of this argument were extremely arrogant when it came to how they were going to approach the government shutdown, the debt ceiling, and Obamacare. Both sides were wrong. Now, obviously, you got over 2 weeks of a government shutdown. We're up against a debt ceiling, $17 trillion in debt. Hundreds of thousands of people not working. And the big number, you want to talk about 5 million lines of code. How about $24 billion? As in, that's how much we lost in the U.S. economy. A bad economy where the jobless numbers will be coming out tomorrow. And I'm pretty certain that these numbers aren't going to look great. They're just not going to look great. Now, when they don't look great, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the misters and the missuses, when those numbers don't look great, don't tell me it's because of the government shutdown. I bet you dollars to donuts those numbers were accumulated on September 30th. the shutdown happened in October. So this does not, I mean, you could say it was the looming factor of the shutdown. Well, yeah, you could have said that in August too, right? It was only 30 days away. You could have said that in July too. That was 60 days away. And we had a history of bumping up against a debt ceiling. So I don't go with that explanation. But I will go with this. On the flip side to that 5 million lines of code, there was $24 billion lost in the economy, an economy that could not afford to lose 15 cents. Just simply could not afford to lose any money whatsoever. So you now have two sides of this equation. You got the Ted Cruz Republicans, and I'll call them the Ted Cruz Republicans right now because they basically held fast behind what Ted Cruz said. I mean, you have your Rubios, you have your Rand Pauls, you have your other folks in the Senate, Mike Lee, Tim Scott. You have some in the Senate. You had the folks in the House that held on as long as they possibly could. They knew that they weren't going to get any changes in Obamacare, even though there should have been. They lost out on the medical device tax, and they should not have allowed that to come off the table. And they lost some concessions on spending, which hopefully they'll get back as we move forward through the rest of 2013. But they knew they could not obtain their number one goal at that point in time, which was getting President Obama to continue the self-repeal for the individual mandate. Because 2013 was not the time to argue that. I said that previously. The time was in 2011. He gave the extension on the Bush tax rates. Get them then while it's hot. Couldn't? Oh, well. Now, on the flip side of this, we're seeing with these 5 million lines of code. We're seeing with the glitches. We're seeing with people signing up for Obamacare because they're so excited about it. They're signing up in the double digits. Yes. A nation with millions of people that are uninsured. We have states that people are signing up in the double digits. Yes. Now, I'm not saying that in order to say Obamacare is the worst idea in the world. I told you several times. And again, call me out if you like. But I've said it previously. Make sure you get your facts right, by the way. I've said this law in its current form, all jumbled together, is a bad law. I never said that every single component of this law is bad. And in fact, if you listen to the majority of Republicans, they will say the same thing. Pre-existing conditions. People staying on their parents' insurance longer. There are certain things that make sense about this law, but it doesn't drive down cost enough. In fact, in some instances, it drives the premiums way up. And we could see from the technical side that it's blotched up. What's the bureaucratic side going to look like? What are these options going to look like as they play out with people touching it? People touched the code and the computers didn't work. The programming didn't work. The software didn't work. What is it going to be like when it's just human beings touching 100% of the rest of the work? That's going to be a problem. So, as I was saying, on both sides of this equation, I highlighted this in Global Grind. I highlighted this on my AURN commentary, the McAllister Minute from this past week. On both sides of this fight, you saw people that had numbers stacked up against them. Whether it was the Ted Cruz Republicans and not having the votes, not having the time, and not having the momentum behind them to get the individual mandate delayed, or President Obama and his administration, which already had thousands of instances of self-repeal, already had thousands of glitches, already had probably dozens of warnings that things were not going to work with Obamacare. Combine it all together, whether you want to look at the $24 billion that Cruz and the Cruz Republicans cost the U.S. economy, if you want to take that argument, or the 5 million lines of code that somebody probably already told President Obama. I'm not going to say that they had an exact number before all these glitches happened, but they had an idea. They knew that with 10-year-old technology, and this is what the USA Today is reporting, that they were crafting and building this system on 10-year-old technology. Now, one could argue, and even I would argue as a former IT guy, that just because it's 10 years old doesn't mean it's not going to work. Doesn't mean it's not going to be stable. Doesn't mean that it can't be managed properly. But when it's 10 years old and your code is bad and your bureaucracy is jumbled up with a law which, by the way, Former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi said, we have to pass a law before you really get an understanding of what's in the law. A, 2,000-page document? So when you take all these things together, somebody told the Obama administration, somebody told former Governor Sebelius that these things were going to happen, that you were going to look at big numbers of flaws, glitches, fatal errors on the system, and more so, the political aspect, because now we're dealing with professional politicians. From the political aspect, this was going to look horrendous. Horrendous. So even if they're bad project managers, where they did not understand that trying to jam this technical rollout in a small period of time before another election came along may not have been a good idea, they are still professional politicians. One of these individuals won the presidency of the United States after not even being in the U.S. Senate for a full term. Another one, which shows some kind of expertise, by the way, politically. The other one, Ms. Sebelius, the former governor of Kansas, was a governor of Kansas, was a governor of a state, which is also, one could say that it's also the same thing as Sarah Palin, but that's also why I also say you got to give Sarah Palin some credit. You don't just fall into being a governor. You have to do some things right. Even if you want to bring up Schwarzenegger and Ventura, they still had to do some things right, whether it was nothing more than the timing of things. You still got to do some things right. You have to have a little bit of political savvy. And former Governor Sebelius has exhibited that in her career. So even if they're the worst project managers that you can find, can't train, can't teach, can't oversee a project, don't understand the technology, they're professional politicians, and they should know the ramifications of jamming bad policy out into the American public too soon. They should know this. So now what are we looking at? Because they obviously took that risk anyway. Number one, they don't think that the patches, from a technical standpoint, could be ready by that December 15th deadline, where people are supposed to be signed up for insurance or risk the fee, which then leads to this. And this is where, if you're a Republican, and give me your feedback on Twitter or on Facebook, if you're a Republican, this is what you got to be looking at. As December 15th approaches, do you then start pushing and saying, President Obama, 5 million lines of code, 10-year-old technology that obviously your team hasn't mastered. They've been working around the clock and it's still not fixed. This has been a high-profile disaster for now 3 full weeks. We're sitting at October 21st. 3 full weeks. President Obama, isn't it time to give the American people a 1-year breather? This is the argument they should still be making. Don't make it under threat of shutting down the government. Don't make it under threat of dealing with the debt ceiling and tying this to the debt ceiling. But you still have to be beating the drum. This is why I say Ted Cruz was right. When you have 5 million pieces of evidence against you, you don't give up your fight. Even if you litigated the case the wrong way, if there's an appellate process, you go through it. And right now, the Republicans do have that appellate process when it comes to Obamacare. And I'm not talking about the Supreme Court. That was last year. What I'm talking about is in the realm of public perception, in the realm of American politics. Because even though the methodologies that the Ted Cruz Republicans took to address this were wrong and clearly wrong, and a majority of Republicans didn't like it, and even the Republicans, when they look at the Tea Party now, are not happy with the Tea Party at all. And one could argue that they never really were that happy with the Tea Party, but they got along. Obviously, 2010 happened. 2009 leading to 2010 happened. We still talk about the Tea Party. So the Republican Party and the Tea Party get along. Whether the Democrats and independents say so or not, they do get along. Generally speaking. In this instance, they don't. But with all that said, the Ted Cruz Republicans obviously still have a point. We'll see the unemployment numbers tomorrow. If those numbers don't look good, now we're talking about an economy where you're not creating the jobs we need, and healthcare reform law that is not doing what we need it to do for Americans because it doesn't work. People can't even go see what they need because it doesn't work. We had legislators admitting that they don't understand the law because it was so complex and so wordy and so gaudy. You have thousands of people begging to get out of this law, including former Speaker Pelosi, Senate Leader Reid. You have all these things on your side as Republicans. You obviously see that you can't play the debt ceiling card. You can't play the budget card. You can't play the government shutdown card quite the way you played it in this time. But that doesn't mean that this fight is over. So what am I saying? I'm saying when you have over 5 million pieces of evidence, you have to continue to hammer it home. I don't know if Ted Cruz is the person that's going to bring that message to the American people, because if they didn't like him before, they really don't like him now. I don't know if it's going to take a John McCain to do it, because people kind of respect John McCain, but the Tea Party and other hardcore conservatives still don't like him. I don't know if it's going to be a Sarah Palin's that's going to bring this message, because people love or hate Sarah Palin. But the right Republican, with the right tone, with the American people, can make the argument that there are over 5 million pieces of evidence basically indicting Obamacare, and the verdict should be at least a 1-year delay on the individual mandate. We should not hit December 15th and be at a point of time where we're still trying to punish people despite the glitches, despite the flaws, while other people are getting exemptions and other people are able to avoid this fiasco, including all 535 people on Capitol Hill. What do you think? That's my take. I mean, I could sit here and talk about these numbers all day, but I want to get your feedback. Again, on Twitter, it's LENNYMCALLISTER. For those that have been giving me feedback, I appreciate it. Keep it going. Love to get your questions. Love to get your feedback. It's the same thing on Facebook. It is tinyurl.com/Lenny page. I will talk to you tomorrow. We'll be talking about these unemployment numbers. We'll be talking about this economy, and we'll be talking about where do we go from here as a nation to get us back on track. In the meanwhile, I will catch you tomorrow indeed. You know I love you. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.